Hi, everybody. Welcome to English Digest. I'm Tom.
Hi, I'm Stephanie.
And today we're going to be talking about the environment, and we are going to the Netherlands, or Holland, as you call it here in Taiwan, although Holland is just a part of the Netherlands. Technically, the Netherlands includes more than just Holland, but we're going there to talk about floating homes. Kind of interesting there because I guess a lot of the Netherlands is below sea level.
Wow, floating home, so you'd be on the water all the time. I'm not sure I'd like that. I get a little seasick. Let's dive in, guys. We're going to read through the article first, and then we'll be back to talk about it.
Over 20 years into the 21st century, climate change has become so prominent that it's changing people's lives. Weather no longer follows its old patterns, and humans are faced with the consequences: floods and rising sea levels. In the Netherlands, where water has always been a danger and land has always been scarce, people are making the best of this situation with floating homes. These are different from houseboats, which are completely mobile and tend to be self-contained. In contrast, floating homes are connected to strong metal poles sunk into the ground. They are also connected to local sewage and electrical systems. Just like many boats, the floating homes of the Netherlands have concrete hulls. These provide stability as they move with the tides or with floods and storm surges. Since they are constructed on water, they also serve to relieve the housing shortage in the Netherlands. However, just like any other kind of house, floating homes have problems too. There are difficulties related to wear and tear because they're constantly moving, and issues with damp because of their location on water. Furthermore, it can be complicated to extend a power grid to buildings on the water. However, the benefits of floating homes are many, and as the climate continues to change, the more choices people have, the better.
Okay, guys, floating homes, no fear of flooding. Yeah, if you're on top of the water, you're on top of the surface, you're probably not going to be too much afraid of flooding. Flooding is a problem we see quite often in Taiwan with all the heavy rain that we get. And when there's too much water, it doesn't have anywhere to go. So sometimes it goes over the riverbanks, or sometimes it goes and floods your streets. I know a lot of people will bring out sandbags and sometimes put those around their homes when we're expecting a typhoon, especially. So flooding is kind of a mess, especially if you live on one of the ground floors.
Exactly. So flooding, of course, is when water rises, it comes out of rivers or whatever, and goes into your homes and your businesses. And, of course, Taiwan is no stranger to flooding because it happens during typhoons quite frequently. Well, here in the first paragraph it says, over 20 years into the 21st century, climate change has become so prominent that it's changing people's lives. Ooh, I don't like reading this sentence. It says the 21st century is already 1/5 over. We're 20 years into the 21st century.
Can't believe it.
It seems like it was only yesterday when we were, looking forward to Y2K, where the computer's going to all shut down.
Which was a lie. Can I just say for the record, how many millions and millions and millions of dollars did we spend on that little lie that was out there, Y2K? Yeah.
Right, but we didn't know what was going to happen. So in any case, that was probably before a lot of your time out there.
Yeah.
But in any case, we're talking about climate change, and we're saying that it has become so prominent that it's changing people's lives. So here we have this pattern, so something that something happens as a result. So basically, climate change has become so serious that it has changed people's lives. So that. Okay, so let's talk about the word prominent here. Prominent just means it's sticking out. It is all around us. We can't not but notice it. So, of course, it's something that is a problem, and we need to think about it. And yes, because of this, our lives have changed.
They have. Actually, before we move on, I wanted to mention with prominent, it could be someone who's famous. Maybe you are studying with a prominent professor, Or someone who's very important would be a prominent figure in history. So you could use it like that too. Moving on, though, to the next sentence. Weather no longer follows its old patterns, and humans are faced with the consequences. Some people are probably out there wondering what's the difference between climate and weather. Climate we use more when we're talking about the weather conditions over a longer period of time, especially in one area. But weather is just how it changes from day to day. Oh, yeah, what's the weather tomorrow? You would never say, what's the climate tomorrow? No. We also use climate to talk about the atmosphere of a place. Ooh, there's kind of a tense climate in that particular business right now. I think they're laying off people. So we use it that way too. But climate, again, when you're talking about rain, sun, wind, temperatures, use it when you're talking about a longer period of time. And then weather is the day-to-day changes that we see around us.
Indeed. So weather no longer follows its old patterns, and humans are faced with the consequences. Yes, a lot of people would agree that weather patterns are changing. They change when we have El Nino, for example, in the Pacific Ocean. And so weather patterns change, like the amount of rainfall you get every year changes, or the amount of snow you get, the amount of storms, etc. And of course, when those things change, then we have to face the consequences. A consequence is the result of something, or there are results of something. Consequences, if you use it plural, in the plural form. But again, they're the result of some sort of action. So, of course, we have to face the consequences. For example, if we're scared of doctors, for example, if we don't like to see doctors, well, there's going to be some consequences there. You'll probably get sick, and you may even die young for not going to the doctor when you should.
Ooh. Yeah, consequences. We typically will use this in the plural form, as you said. So, yeah, what are the consequences of our actions, our decisions? They could be good or bad, but once you make a decision, you have to live with the consequences. So floods and rising sea levels might be some of the consequences of the patterns of weather and climate that we're seeing. Now, in the Netherlands, as Tom mentioned, it's also referred to as Holland. They speak Dutch. They have excellent English in the Netherlands, I discovered. Sometimes it's hard to even hear an accent. It sounds so much like even American English. So what is the capital? Amsterdam. I'm sure a lot of our travelers out there have heard of that particular city. Amsterdam, and then their government is at The Hague. So, yeah, the Netherlands. Water has always been a danger there, and land has always been scarce. If something is scarce, you just don't have enough of it. Sometimes we don't have enough oil and gas, it becomes scarce, or maybe you're running low on cash. So, yeah, money's kind of scarce right now. You just don't have enough of something. It's insufficient for your needs or for the demand.
Exactly. So, of course, land has been scarce there. They always have to figure out ways to build things, and maybe they have land reclamation projects and things like that to have artificial land like they do in Hong Kong. And people are making the best of this situation with floating homes. Indeed, if water seems to be everywhere and you need a place to live, why not build a home or a house that can float on the water? And if something floats, well, it doesn't sink. And these are different from houseboats, which are completely mobile and tend to be self-contained. So we've got floating homes and we've got houseboats. You may have heard of houseboats before. They're quite common in cities along the coast. I know a lot of people in, say, Seattle have houseboats that they live on for a while. I don't think they live there permanently because, like it's going to say later on, they don't have like electricity hookups and sewage hookups and things like that. So maybe you can spend a weekend on a houseboat, but I don't think you can live on one for years and years.
I think some people try. It depends on the weather, doesn't it? Yeah, but these, I thought at first, Tom, when we started this, I thought, oh, a floating home. Are they talking about houseboats? But actually, we're trying to make a contrast or compare them and show you that they're not the same. They're very different. What's the difference? Well, as Tom said, the houseboats are self-contained. It's like having an RV when you travel around and you've got a kitchen in your RV, a bed there, you can cook. It has water that you have to refill and then dump out, but they are self-contained. So in contrast, what's the difference? Well, floating homes are connected to strong metal poles sunk into the ground. So it helps them not move too much because they are attached to the land, but they're on these strong metal poles. They're also connected to local sewage and electrical systems, so they don't have their own power base that they're using. Sewage is the dirty water that we've used. It could be the wastewater from your kitchen or your bathrooms. That's sewage. And electrical systems is how we get our power. And if you want to have lights, and maybe you have an electric stove or a microwave, you're going to need some electrical power.
Right, and I'm imagining that those metal poles allow the home to go up and down as water levels rise.
Yeah.
And go back down. And maybe they also have some connections for gas, natural gas, like they have here in Taiwan. We don't order the bottles where I live. We have the natural gas come into our home, which I think is quite common. And so, again, these floating homes are connected to local sewage and electrical systems, and again, maybe natural gas. Okay, that brings us about to the midway point in our discussion for today. Let's take a break now and listen to our Chinese teacher.
听众朋友大家好，我是安娜。我们今天要来谈谈有关于环境的议题哦。那当然我们知道在21世纪经过了这些年之后，尤其最近20多年，其实气候的变化真的是很大，而且这个议题很重要，以至于其实这个气候变化一直在改变大家的生活。好，这其实是文章在第1段第1句特别提到的这样子的一个想法。那当然在这样子的一个困难度之下呢，大家都知道水患跟这个海平面上升的问题是很严重。所以我们今天来看看荷兰。像荷兰的话呢，跟水相关的问题就一直存在着这种危险性，而且在当地土地都很稀少，所以大家就可以善尽呢，比如说利用一些水上漂浮物啦，可以解决这样子的一个情况。好，我们看一下第1段第3句的地方。第3句这里哦，我们来看一下有一个逗点之后插入的补充说明的关系子句。当然我们可以判断出逗点前的先行词就是 the Netherlands， 就是荷兰。可是大家可能会想说，逗点之后 where 到句尾，这个地方的官复为什么要用 where？ 好，如果说 where 是一个官复，也就是说它是一个副词，那么副词其实在英文当中它就是用来修饰完整的句子，完整的句子。好，所以也就是说，如果我们今天把逗点跟逗点中间括号起来，我们看的是一个关系子句，那么官复 where 后面所有的句子应该都是完整的。那什么叫完整呢？就是它不缺主词、受词或者是补语。所以大家可以看，在逗点中间这个 where 开始的关系子句，其实它里面包含了2个小小的完整子句。第一个子句在 and 前面 Water has always been a danger， 这是完整，有主词，有 be 动词，也有补语。 and 后面也是一样， Land has always been scared， 有主词，有 be 动词，也有补语。所以在这种情况之下，如果关系子句当中本来就有主词、受词，也有补语的话，那么空格的这个关系词一定会用副词。那么副词的文意你就要看先行词是什么。如果说它是 the Netherlands 是一个地方，当然就是 where， 也就是说而在荷兰这个地方，这里的 where 强调的是关系子句当中的地点。那我们可以直接进入到第4句，我们来看一下第4句同样也有一个补充说明的关系子句。逗点的前面是 houseboats， houseboats 先行词一定是名词，这个没有问题。那么逗点之后的 which 到句尾你可以先括号起来。在这里为什么用的是 which 呢？因为我们要判断它是不是完整，这个句子有没有缺主词、受词或者是补语，我们完全要先以动词来出发。括号当中的 be 动词是 are。 在英文当中，动词前面就会是主词，所以 are 的前面如果什么都没有，就表示这个空格所谓的which，它一定当关系子句的主词来使用。所以逗点之后，如果顺着文意下来，是这些 houseboats， 也就是这些水上漂浮屋，逗点。这些屋子完完全全可以移动，而且是独立运作的。好，那么接着呢，我们就要进入到第一段这个第5句的地方哦。第5句也是一样有一个关系子句，但是这个关系子句呢，它被省略、被简化了。我们来看先行词是 strong metal poles， 后面的 sunk into the ground， 其实少的是冠带 which 或者是 that， 还有 be 动词的 are。好，那第一，我们先行词 strong metal poles 这里没有问题。再来括号里面的 sunk， 为什么我们会知道它是被动呢？因为如果关系词被删掉之后，后面的动词会直接变成动词 ing， 也就是说，假设你觉得它不是被动，而是主动沉，那么这里的关系子句简化应该会用 sinking。但是你看到的是 PP， 也就是说原本关系子句在简化的时候是 be 动词的 BEING 被省略掉，所以直接剩下 PP sunk into the ground.
We're going to take a quick break. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back, guys. We're talking about floating homes in the Netherlands. It's a country in Western Europe, and it doesn't have a large population. It only has about 16 million people. I was just looking this up and seeing how many people live there.
About half the population of Taiwan, huh?
Yeah. So not a lot. I've only been to Amsterdam. It was a quick trip.You go there as a student and you want to see, some of the sights, the wooden shoes and the tulips. They have beautiful tulips and the homes are very unique there as well. But I don't remember seeing a floating home when I was in Amsterdam. But of course, this was a long time ago.
Kind of depends on where you go in the Netherlands. So here in the next paragraph, it begins by saying, just like many boats, the floating homes of the Netherlands have concrete hulls. Okay, so again, we're talking about floating homes. And lots of boats have these hulls that are not made out of wood or metal, but they're actually made out of concrete.Which is, I believe, a mixture of cement and sand and other chemicals and things like that. The hull is the outside of a ship, okay? It is the hard part that touches the water, and hopefully the hull is waterproof so the boat does not sink. And that's kind of hard to imagine. Wouldn't a concrete hull be heavy and wouldn't it sink?
Yeah, for me, I think, wow, that would be really heavy.But it works, obviously, because they've got these homes floating. So these provide stability as they move with the tides or with floods and storm surges. So the level of the water is going to be moving, but this home just moves right along with it. I imagine it kind of moves up and down a little more than side to side, but I haven't seen them.It might kind of feel kind of like going through an earthquake in Taiwan to be on one of these floating homes. Sometimes our earthquakes go back and forth, and it's kind of soothing if you're not too scared. But when they go up and down, yeah, that gets me scared too.
Which makes me wonder if you could actually feel an earthquake in a floating home.
I don't think
Maybe
so.
the water would absorb the shock or something.
Yeah.
Interesting to think about, although I don't think they get a lot of earthquakes in the Netherlands. So again, we've got concrete hulls, and they provide stability, which means they don't move a lot, and they move with the tides and with floods and storm surges. A storm surge is when the water rises because of a storm, basically. When a lot of rain falls, we have those a lot here in Taiwan, storms that cause water levels to rise. Those would be storm surges. And since they are constructed on water, they also serve to relieve the housing shortage in the Netherlands. Yeah, they only have so much land there, so if you have these floating homes over water, then you've created space that way, so it gives people places to live where they don't have to compete with others on the land.
Yeah, so that's one good thing. They also are like any other kind of house, the floating homes have problems too. As most of you who have lived in a home for a while, maybe some of you are too young to experience this yet, but older homes tend to have things that break down and they need to be replaced, and you just have to keep maintaining them and repairing things as they break. Well, floating homes are just like that as well. There are difficulties related to wear and tear because they're constantly moving. Now, wear and tear is a phrase that you'll hear us often use in English. It just means, you know, the normal everyday damage that occurs when you're living someplace. If you are renting an apartment like I am, your landlord will assume, you know, that maybe you drop and break a couple of things, or maybe you hit something too hard and you kind of dent something or damage something a little bit. Not because you're trying to damage anything, but just because it's life and things break sometimes. So that's what wear and tear means. And they're constantly moving. Plus, they've got water to deal with.
Right, they've got issues with damp because of their location on water. An issue is like a problem or something that you need to deal with. You might have issues in your company. Oh, yeah, we've had some issues recently with quality control. Customers have been complaining about the quality, so we need to talk to people on the assembly line to deal with those issues or to deal with those problems. So they've got some issues that involve the damp. Damp here just refers to the condition of there being lots of moisture around, and that means things kind of get soggy, the wood gets kind of soft, and maybe mold grows everywhere. So if you have damp or dampness, you could also say, that causes certain amounts of problems. It's similar to humidity, but dampness or damp is more contained in the things rather than the air. Humidity is in the air.
Yeah, and with damp issues, wow, usually you have a lot of mildew and mold, and things just break down even faster that way. It also can be hard for kids who have breathing issues. You have to be careful if you have some kids that maybe have asthma or something. The damp can be tough on them. So it is located, or these homes are located on the water, so you have to take that into account. An issue, as Tom said, it's a problem. It's usually used to describe something that's negative and not positive. Sometimes we'll say, yeah, that guy has a lot of issues. Maybe he's not emotionally stable, or, you know, he just has difficulty functioning in life. Oh, that person has issues. You'll hear that sometimes, especially if you're watching TV shows or movies. Yeah, so there are issues with how damp everything is there. Damp is also used frequently, and actually more so than a noun. It's used as an adjective. Wow, that house is really damp. The basement's very damp. We'll tend to use it that more than we will as a noun.
So that's a problem indeed, because these floating homes are located on water.
Totally.
So, of course, they're right next to water all the time. Furthermore, it can be complicated to extend a power grid to buildings on the water. Indeed, water can conduct electricity. So if you have electric cables running to these homes, there's a chance that the cables will touch the water, or the casing of the cables will break down because of salt water and stuff like that. So people could get electrocuted if they're in the water. That might be a problem. So yeah, I could imagine that being a problem. They're sending electricity to these homes when they're floating on water, especially, as I said, since water conducts electricity.
Well, it says, however, the benefits of floating homes are many. What are some of the benefits? We're going to talk about that. But benefits just means, the positive aspects, the good things. What are the benefits? If you're getting a job, you'll often ask your prospective employer, what are the health benefits? Your benefits package would include your health insurance, maybe your vacation, things like that, your benefits. But a benefit is just an advantage that something has, or some sort of profit that you can gain from something. So there are benefits of floating homes. I wouldn't want to live on the water, to be honest. I don't like the smell. I don't like the smell of fish. So the smell of the sea isn't very attractive to me. So that would not be a benefit for me. That would be definitely a disadvantage. You can also use pro and con to describe things that are good and bad in your viewpoint. What are the pros? What are the cons? What are the benefits? What are the disadvantages? So here are some of the benefits that they are thinking of. They're thinking that it's going to be a benefit if the climate does continue to change and maybe the sea levels aren't stable, and that will be helpful to the people there who have these floating homes.
Indeed. Even if you don't believe in climate change, if you think it's a hoax, still ocean levels change over time because of the Milankovitch cycles and things like that. So, of course, this might be a concern in the future, having these floating homes, and especially that may be true if a country has problems with space, which I think is a concern here in Taiwan because it's a mountainous island with lots of people, and of course they're building high-rise apartment buildings all the time. Maybe some people might consider building homes like this, say in Kaohsiung Harbor or something like that, or in Geelong or something. I kind of doubt that would happen, but still it's something to think about. Who knows? Maybe it would help out the housing situation here.
It might. It just might. We're going to take a break now, listen to our Chinese teacher one more time, and then we'll be back to wrap up.
那么接下来我们就要进入到第二段咯。那既然水上的漂浮屋有这样子的一个功能的话，当然水上漂浮屋一定要够重的话，它才能够不会被这个洪水啦，或者是风暴的这种移动被飘走。所以基本上这个船体是有混凝土的。好，我们在第二段当中第二句，请特别注意一下，中间有一个连接词的 as。在英文当中，如果是连接词，它的后面就会出现动词，例如在这里看到的是 move。那它当连接词就有3个意义，你要根据上下文去推断。When, because 或如同好像，所以在这里应该强调的是时间，所以在这里是 when 的意思。当它们移动的时候，就不会随风飘走。好，接下来的第3句，我们同样看一下前面的 since 这个字 ，since 也是连接词哦，但是它有自从或因为 because 的意思，就要根据上下文文意来推断。在这里是 because 的意思。不过同样这一段呢，我们特别有看到一个重点，也就是这一段当中的最后面的地方，在最后这一句第7句的地方。第7句最后面我们看到 The more choices people have, the better。 好，这是一个 the 加比较级的句型，通常指的是2个不同的子句当中描述的人事物状况形成了正比或者是反比。例如我们在这一句看到的是 The more choices people have， 大家有越多的选择，逗点之后是 the better， 是更好的。有时候文意会说什么越多什么就越少，或什么越少或什么就越多，它是一个 the 加比较级，逗点 the 加比较级的句型，强调2个事情会有正或者是反的一种这个随上的这个一种关系。好，那么我们今天的课漏字呢，就先谈到这边，我们下次见咯。
All right, everybody, that brings us to the end of our discussion for today about our article about floating homes in the Netherlands. And yes, indeed, I hope you learned a lot about how people live in the Netherlands. And maybe the next time you go there, after you get done picking tulips and looking at the windmills and walking around in wooden shoes, you might head down to the ocean side and check out these floating homes. From all of us here at English Digest, I'm Tom.
I'm Stephanie.
Goodbye.
Bye.